Should I send it back to you, Brett?
Please, thank you.
Okay. There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Oh, and I did announce it, but we are live on YouTube, on YouTube. UGTV will start in a minute. We're live on UGTV as well.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that due to COVID-19, commissioners, staff, and the public are attending remotely via Zoom or by phone. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak so the public that is observing knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and is current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General. Due to COVID-19 requirements, in-person public comment has been suspended unless otherwise required by law. The public is allowed to participate by Zoom or submit comments by email prior to the meeting. Those comments are included in the record of the meeting. I'd ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Roll call. Bynum.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Ramirez.
Here.
Johnson. Kane.
Here.
Markley.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Philbrook.
Here.
Alvey.
Here. Thank you. Our invocation is being given by Commissioner Harold Johnson of Faith Deliverance Church of God in Christ.
Mr. Mayor, I believe Commissioner Johnson is absent from tonight's meeting.
Oh, you are so right. Thank you. Then I will lead us. Father, we thank you for joining us together this day. We thank you for the so many great gifts that you have given us, our families, our friends, our faith, and the call to serve your people. We ask that you bless us with patience and generosity this evening so that we might serve your will for your people. And we ask you this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States of America
and
and
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any revisions to tonight's agenda?
Mayor, there were no revisions.
All right. First order of business, consent agenda. Does any member of the commission or the county administrator wish to set aside any item on the consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the consent agenda will be voted on by one vote.
McKiernan, move to approve all as submitted.
Markley, second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner McKiernan, a second by Commissioner Markley. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Ramirez. Ramirez. Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Philbrook,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez. The vote is 8-0. That motion carries.
Commissioner Ramirez, are you having trouble unmuting? You might have to reconnect. Looks like you might have to reconnect. Okay. Next is a public hearing to receive citizen comments considering the resolution for the Call River Bridge development, bridge lease, management agreements, and the ordinance amending the existing riverfront redevelopment district. I'd ask Mr. Bach to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Bach, County Administrator. So this item on the agenda this evening is regarding what's commonly referred to as the Rock Island Bridge project. It is the Car Riverfront Development District. There are two items that appear on your agenda this evening. One is regarding the district and the other is regarding the development agreement that we have with the developer who will be working on the project. Staff will be making a presentation along with the developer regarding the project. We will cover all these topics together. We will then need to have a public hearing regarding the TIF district. And then we would request a consideration of action after comment and questions are answered by the commission. With that, I would like to turn this over to our inside counsel, Patrick Waters, who will be leading the presentation, along with Todd LaSala, who is our outside counsel who is assisting on this project, and Michael Zeller, who is the developer on the project.
Thank you,
Patrick,
Mr.
I believe you're leading off.
Thank you, Mr. Bach. First of all, I would like to thank our Economic Development Director, Catherine Carter, for everything that she's done to get this agreement to where it is today. I'm going to do my best to fill in for her tonight, but really Catherine and our outside counsel at both Stinson and Gilmore and Bell did all the hard work to get this development agreement in place. So let me see if I can. All right. So all across the country, we've seen cities reactivating their riverfront areas. They've built walkways, bridges, parks, and other amenities. And these attractions have really provided both recreational and commercial activities for residents and tourists alike. If you've been to Des Moines, you will recognize this as a picture of their downtown Riverwalk area, and they have a really beautiful bridge that spans across the river there. Here's a picture of the Bob Carey pedestrian bridge. This connects Omaha to Council Bluffs, and they have some park areas on either end of the bridge, and you can walk or bike across it. Here's a picture of Waterfront Park in Louisville, and you will notice in the background an old railroad bridge that they have reused, which provides a nice segue into what we're talking about here tonight. So this is just a map so everyone can kind of get their bearings. Downtown KCK is up this way. The Stockyards area is down to the lower right. You see State Line is right here. And so there's a small area that's actually on the Kansas City, Kansas side that, it hasn't been developed yet. The new Yards apartments are going to go down there. And then at the very bottom of your screen, it's very faint. Right here is the Rock Island Bridge, if you can see my cursor there. So we've been really fortunate that it just seems like a kind of a confluence of events have come together here lately that have really a lot of different events happening all at once in this area. You just heard earlier tonight about the levee improvements and all the trails and connections that are going to be built as part of that project. We have the new development in the West Bottoms area with the Yards apartments that will be coming soon. And of course, the Armourdale master plan which is currently in the process. So right now I'd like to turn it over to Michael Zeller of Flying Truss LLC, and he can talk about the vision he has for this project.
Thank you, Patrick. Happy to talk about this proposed public-private partnership. That is, of course, a view of the lovely Kansas River that comes sweeping in from Lawrence and bends around and heads north there to Strawberry Hill and the confluence with the Missouri River. It's a lovely view. It's a bigger river than a lot of people think. You get down on it, it's about 130 yards across. It's a big river. Next, please. This, of course, is the Rock Island Railroad Bridge, built in 1904 by the American Bridge Company. It was an integral component to the Stockyards District that existed on both sides of the river at that time. Both sides of this bridge are fully in the city of Kansas City, Kansas. And my partners, Mike Ladden and John McGurk in Flying Truss, have leased that bridge with the intention of creating an event space and other activities. And we were approached by the unified government to consider also making it a public trail that connects levee top trails on both sides, because it was explained to us that that Wyandotte County has perhaps 1/27th of the linear feet of trail per person as neighboring Johnson County does. And this would be a rather expedient way to mitigate that by lighting up those levee tops, which are essentially already a trail with a view. And that's what started us on this path together, working with County Administrator Bach and his team, Catherine Carter. Next slide, please. There you see the Kaw River Trail as it stands right now, phases 1 and 2. The original thinking, I was told, was to carry on the western side of the river, but as they got closer, they realized that there were some disadvantages to that. The bridges tended to be lower on that side of the river for some reason, which would require more expensive engineering down under. There's a wall on that side, which it's better to not ride your bike behind a wall. And there's a railroad yard at the top end. So the thinking shifted, and that's what started our partnership to cross the river there and create a scenic crossing and a destination on the way to give people a reason to be on the trail in the first place. But then to eventually run the levee top up. It's a straight shot levee top run all the way up to the Riverfront Heritage Trail that connects downtown Kansas City, Kansas to Kansas City, Missouri. Next slide, please. There's just another view of the Kaw. That's the upstream tip of the island that's in the Kansas River, as seen from the levee top. Next. Here's the Caba. Mr. Galicia has organized with Lee Trotter a Wednesday night ride that fired up again last night for the first time this year, last summer on that trail. There's one of those low bridges I mentioned. Next slide, please. Another shot from the trail. It's nice. You're up high. You can look out over the river. This is a schematic of the Rock Island Bridge. This bridge is longer than the St. Louis Arch is tall. This is looking south, and you see there's two main trusses were the original trusses built in 1904, installed in 1905. Each one of those is the length of an NFL football field. This is a very large structure. To the left at the bridge's eastern end is a smaller truss that was added during World War I when the levee channel was widened. You see the Gould Evans design. The primary feature is an unobstructed pathway across the bridge 12 months a year, morning all day long through the day until nighttime for people wanting to use that public crossing. You'll also notice that we've created more real estate on the bridge. This is a heavy railroad bridge inspected by Trans Systems as part of a MARC grant, Mid-America Regional Council. And they found it to be quite robust and able to carry enormous weights. What we're doing is rather insignificant by comparison to locomotives and freight trains. We're cantilevering out on the central truss to create what is the nation's first trailhead over a river. There will be 11 public bathrooms, drinking fountain, bike ranks, bike tools, and also private services, a couple of high velocity commercial kitchens, a coffee shop and a bar, and just acres of seating, open public seating. You can think of this bridge as kind of like Union Station. It's a big public space that's animated by and ultimately paid for by private enterprises that are out there. On the second deck above it, which is the same width, 13-foot cantilevers on both sides, but a little bit shorter in linear-wise, is an open public deck, more public restrooms. There's an elevator that connects to it, plus 2 staircases, and an event space, which we intend to rent out on Thursday, Fridays, and Saturday evenings, kind of like the way the North Hall of Union Station gets rented out during those times. At the far right of the diagram, on the western side, is an important component that we've added called the community zone. And there we're cantilevering out 9 feet, and we're inviting the community to develop with us ways that activate that space and the levee top trail system and the river itself. And we've had some really great conversations with CABA's Free Wheels for Kids. We're going to be approaching philanthropy for help with this, and we think it's a very fundable project. I'm the former development director for Kansas City PBS, and this sure seems like a fundable project for lightweight structures, perhaps improved shipping containers that are painted with windows and roller doors. Free Wheels for Kids, for example, would like to have an ongoing presence out there with a bike bench in it, and they fix up bikes and provide them to kids who can't afford to buy them. So you can imagine kids riding their bikes in on Saturday afternoon or on a Wednesday afternoon in the summer and wrenching bikes with mentors, and then heading out onto the Metro's trail systems together on bike rides. Also, Friends of the River, a not-for-profit group, has 67 kayaks and canoes. They want a kiosk there to rent those to the general public and to teach people, especially kids, how to boat on the Kaw, which of course is a very tranquil river compared to the Missouri River. And perhaps there'll be some improvements that'll take them right down to the river frontage there and realize Kansas City Metro's long-held dream to have more interaction with our big river system. Next slide, please. That's just the welcome. That's going to look like that on both ends. The trail just comes right up, and then this will be a dismount zone as there will be so many people on the bridge. We're going to program the bridge also with simple things like, buskers playing music and magicians to art fairs and craft beer festivals. Maybe we have an agreement with Quixotic, the aerialists, to be up in the rafters. A lot of fun can be happening on that bridge with a lot of people, and we don't want people blasting through on a 10-speed. And you see the trail there comes in from the right, and then they would just dismount and then cross the bridge from there. Next. That's the southern side of the bridge where we're preserving space for the public crossing. People in a chair or walking across will always be able to make their way across this bridge unimpeded. Next. That's on the north side. That's more programmed. You see there's tables and more obstruction. The guiding, when you work with architects, they ask you to think about things conceptually before they start their work. And one of the concepts that we came up with was a braided stream, so that the experience for anyone in transit is not a straightaway linear shot like a sidewalk, but it's an area that you explore and you make your way across. And now with the second level deck that we've added to the concept, you can also go up and down. Next. That's looking southeast. So Hy-Vee Arena there is just at the top left of the screen. That's the central truss. It's 100 yards long. And you see at the top there on your left is an event space. Gould Evans Architects are doing the design work, and we have preliminary designs and are going to be going into final design stage this summer. And that shows the event space on your left there with a roof in the open position. It will be possible for us to design it to open and close. We're debating the pros and cons of that, though. That's a 300-person event space for weddings, family reunions, corporate events, charity fundraisers. The blocks that you see is just architects massing that represents another coffee shop and a bar, a staging area for catering, and men's and women's restrooms. And there's a small a box to the right of the bigger box. That's an ADA elevator, so people can get up and down. The kitchens, they're not really restaurants, they're commercial kitchens, kind of like a food truck without wheels, are on the lower level. And we have letters of intent with Slaps Barbecue and Papakino's Pizza. And we selected them because this is going to be a spiky business out here. And on really warm evenings in the summer, when the Royals are in town and Hy-Vee Arena's going next door, and we've got programming going on that bridge, there's going to be a lot of people out there. And we really needed restaurants with a long history and a large staff, and a mothership nearby where they could prep items and send extra staff down on busy nights, because what we don't want to have is several hundred people waiting for their dinner, that kind of thing. Next. That's, again, the Central Truss as viewed from the eastern bank near Hy-Vee Arena at twilight. You see the trail that people are standing on. We'll connect with that bridge. Next. That's up top in the event space. You see it now captures the full 55-foot height of the structure itself. It's about 20 feet across. It's interesting. There's a lot of little rivets and bolts, and there are lift gates to look at. It's rather cathedral-like. Next. And there it is again from a lower view. We've looked all over the place, and the Mid-America Regional Council study also paid Eldorado architects to examine the viability of this concept of joining up a public crossing with the destination. And they looked all over the place, and they couldn't find another example of a steel bridge destination like this. There's, of course, the famous medieval bridges in China and the Ponte Vecchio Bridge in Florence. But nobody could find anything approaching this. There's little bump outs on a lot of bridges where you stop your 10 speed and take a squirt of water and look around, but nobody's taken it to this level. This will be America's and perhaps the world's first destination bridge. Next. That is the community zone, which we're going to turn to the community to help us name. I think it could be a great place for the KCK Farmers Market on a Saturday morning. There's a lot of activity that can happen out there. We're looking at also putting a guest kitchen and programming that area and inviting a small people doing really great stuff to join us out there on that bridge in the kitchen. Next. And that's a view from the western end looking in at the community zone. Next. This is a separate initiative that's probably worth mentioning, a separate LLC in which I participate as one of 14 people. Mike and Joe Pierce, who own Slaps Barbecue, the new fellow that's running the Stowers Institute, Julian Zagudagoida that leads the Nelson Atkins, quite a mix of people have bought 2 riverboats, and frankly, they're steel barges that are 60 feet long and 20 feet wide. And we are working on restoring them with the intent of operating them on the Kansas River as floating event spaces or docks, not as commercial service moving people around, as transit, but as entertainment. And we hope to locate one of them at the base of the Rock Island Bridge on that western shore there. We think there's be very synergistic with what's happening on the bridge that will be lit up. And we also intend to light up the river down below. Next. This is an example. There's Patrick mentioned a confluence of happy things that are coming together rather serendipitously. I think the redevelopment of the Hy-Vee Arena by Steve Fouch, Flaherty Collins' decisions to move in next door, John McGurk and Mike Ladden and I moving forward with the Rock Island Bridge, and just a general I think, realization in the metro that, hey, this is a good place to start. I think what's happening at Berkeley Park is also a great development on our big river system, but this is a great spot to really put our arms around our big river system. And I use that word system intentionally because the call is really part of it. You know, one day I hope that we can take boats from the bridge up to the island, down to Caw Point, over to the city of Kansas City, coming down out of the city market there on that pier, and people can start to move around in our city by water. There's a kind of a call awakening. Somebody called it the other day. I think that's great, emerging. This is an example of an event that we hosted in October. I had sent a new slide of the version where that many of these same groups are hosting on Saturday, June 12th, and you'll all be receiving email invitations to that. We're going to have the Friends of the Car are going to have 25 or 30 kayaks and canoes. We're going to have motorboat rides. And Rashida Phillips of the American Jazz Museum will be singing from the bridge. And La Placida is bringing their food trucks down or their food tents down. And we're just going to have a good time celebrating the Kansas River. Next, please. There's another look on the call at one of those call socials that we've been hosting with all of these different partners. It's the big river. Next. And there it is again with downtown, of course, in the background. Next. And that boy's having a good time. That was at our last call social. Next. There's a lot of potential. This is pretty ambitious to start with, but we're only really using about a third of what's possible on the bridge. We intend to have, there's a lot of fun that can be had over time out there, and to give it some thought and let it develop naturally, both in commercial activities, but we don't intend that everything happen out there have a dollar attached to it or a cash register. We want to have a lot of art. That's why we've asked Julian Zaguda-Goita and Dana Knapp, who leads the Kansas City Art Alliance, to serve on a disbursement committee with the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation, and they both agreed. We think that it would be fun to develop vertical gardens out there. There's wind, there's solar, there's water power below with the Corps' permission. We could have kinetic art. There's heavy lift gates that we could put other things on top of. In year 8, we're looking at doing perhaps a steakhouse or a boutique distillery atop one of those 2 lift gates out there, out over the middle of the river. It'd be a lot of fun. And that's Steve Fouts on top of Hy-Vee Arena a little over a year ago now. And we were talking with Gayle E. Steve's ambition is to put a ropes course as the next step in his business plan, and on the roof of Hy-Vee Arena that could possibly culminate with a zip line or 2 that launches folks out across the state line, across the Kansas River, and then they would come back by the bridge. It's not part of our plan at this point. There's a lot going on there, and I think the commission wisely asked for an independent feasibility study. And the Kansas Secretary of Commerce, David Tolan, assisted in funding that along with the UG. Thank you. HR&A, which is a New York City-based planning firm. They run numbers on projects around the country. Won that proposal, and they're also famous for having designed the High Line, the elevated reclaimed trellis that runs down into Lower Manhattan. It's a real sensation. I believe it has as many or more visitors every year now as Central Park does, and it's credited with triggering the Hudson Yards development, which is America's largest development right now, and a lot of other good stuff. Reclaiming things is kind of difficult. It usually requires public-private collaboration, but it can bring outsized rewards. Their determination was that this trail will, as originally intended, connect up the levee trails, not only to your own trails on both sides, but link the Kansas City, Kansas trails to the metro trails. Since the study, we've met with Brian Platt and Eric Bunch, the Kansas City, Missouri city manager and city rep, and they are planning to bring a trail down Cesar Chavez Avenue down right to the bridge there and connect the west side of Kansas City, Missouri with this next emerging nexus, along with the trail that goes north along the levee top. So that's very interesting. This will, of course, reclaim what is right now, frankly, an attractive nuisance. We've gated it and fenced it, but it is still possible for people to get out there, and they do sneak out there at night and they start fires, and we're going to fix that and turn it into that negative into a positive. It'll create about 65 jobs. It'll be a catalyst for a lot of things. We think it'll help transmit that economic energy growing on the east side of the Kansas River, across the river and down Kansas Avenue. There's been some planning organizations that are working on that right now, and it's pretty exciting, their visions for moving that energy into Armourdale. It will return the UG's $2 million initial investment through a CID and a TIF on the bridge. And of course, we're going to pay ad valorem taxes, and there's a revenue share for the unified government. This project will deliver a big piece of public infrastructure. The bridge will transfer to KCK, and we're going to improve it together and ultimately pay the UG back with a surplus. And the lead investigator concluded her remarks with something that really knocked our socks off. When she said that this is one of the things that people will think of when you say Kansas City, which is really exciting. We think it'll be right up there with the Shuttlecocks and Union Station. Be a great subject for the network television blimps during Monday Night Football when we're out there, slaps of smoke and barbecue, and we've got twinkly lights and people dancing, in a puddle of light out there over the Kansas River. It's going to be a lot of fun. Next slide. Yeah, that kind of speaks for itself. These places around the country, we all know and love them, and they deliver outsized rewards. It becomes part of the identity of a city. Safety is very important to us and to our investors and our underwriters. And Flying Trust is retaining a professional safety manager to consult with the design and operation teams. We budgeted for security cameras to closely monitor the bridge in real time. We also plan to have a version of downtown KC Mo's Yellow Jackets on hand by day, keeping an eye on things and creating a presence. And during the evening and weekends, we budgeted for security as needed. And as with the Metro's many rooftop venues, the railing systems that Gould Evans are designing will be stout, they'll be climb resistant, and they'll exceed code in height. Next slide, please. America's first destination landmark bridge, the Rock Island Bridge, the RIB in Kansas City, Kansas.
Thank you, Michael. So again, these are just a few of the benefits that we see coming from the bridge project. New taxes, new businesses, increased real estate value, and of course, the increase in quality of life as we provide additional recreational and commercial activities for our residents. So the total project cost is projected to be just under $5 million. Flying Trust will provide the majority of that. As you can see, as part of this agreement tonight, the unified government would commit to $2 million of that capital. However, that would be repaid over time, as Michael mentioned. Again, the H&R study, the economic impact analysis, stated that they believe that that $2 million would be repaid within 12 to 15 years. We have a sales tax TIF, we have a property tax TIF, as well as a 2% CID that is built into this agreement. We would provide $75,000 up front, but that's just for some final design and construction documents. And that again would have to be matched by Flying Trust. So in addition to getting paid back the $2 million that we invest, on top of that, these are the estimated additional benefits to the unified government. We have an annual rent that Flying Trust would pay, about $9,300 a year, which goes up each year. We have the revenue sharing agreement, as Michael discussed. So the better that Flying Trust does, the better that the unified government does. After the TIF is paid off, of course, then we start receiving all the additional sales tax revenue. we start receiving the additional property tax revenue. And finally, there is a fiber that goes through the bridge that we estimate we would receive. The unified government would own that, and we estimate that we would receive around $25,000 annually for that. So over the course of 20 years, we're looking at about $2.3 million in additional financial benefits. I would now like to turn it over to our outside counsel, Todd LaSala, who will go in more detail about this deal structure itself and what the unified government is doing to mitigate our risk.
Thank you, Patrick. This is Todd LaSala from Stinson. Good evening, everyone. I will try and be very brief about the 200 pages of documents that comprise our development agreement this time and the 5-page executive summary that you have. There's a lot of detail in those. I'm going to hit this from a pretty high level. Very interesting project, calls for a very interesting and for us in some ways unusual deal structure as well. The ownership structure itself is a little unique in that the unified government is going to buy and own the bridge. The bridge is currently owned by Kansas City, Missouri, despite the fact that it's all in Kansas, which is sort of odd. But as part of this, once we get through the development agreement conditions and we know we've got a real project here, the UG will buy the bridge from Kansas City, Missouri for $1. Throughout the life of these agreements, the underlying bridge will be owned by the unified government. However, possession will be delivered over to the developer in a couple of different ways. Attached to our development agreement, we have a lease and a management agreement. And that's because we intend to condominiumize the bridge. And the components of the bridge that are really for public uses, like the trails, some of these open air spaces that Mike we're talking about, those public uses are going to be a public use unit in our condominium, and they're going to be governed by a management agreement. And then we've talked a little bit about a lease. The lease will govern the commercial portions of the project. So the condo units that are under the lease are going to be subject to these terms. Now, our development agreement will last the life of the incentives. That's 20 to 22 years. But the lease and the management agreement will last longer, 33 years initially, with an option to renew both of those documents for an additional 33 years. So it could be 66 years that the developer is subject to the provisions that I'm going to talk about and the provisions that are in our documents. This slide also shows you a little bit about the lease. We've alluded to this before. The developer is going to pay us $9,300 a year to start with. That's going to increase with the consumer price index over the life of the lease. And there is also this revenue sharing concept that is really percentage rent built into the lease, 2% of their gross revenue over a $2 million threshold, and then 5% over $5 million that the developer makes. So it's a revenue sharing provision in that lease. Next slide, please. The management agreement, I'm going to touch on operations here. The management agreement, which again will cover the public components, both documents have similar provisions about operations. Flying Trust is really going to take over responsibility for maintaining the bridge, operating the bridge, caring for the trails and the public components, and operating all the good stuff on the commercial side that Mike has talked about. But we're going to set forth a standard of care, and there are maintenance standards. All of that is really going to be covered and taken care of by the developer. Next slide, please. Public access. On this slide, you'll see some of the things that the UG is agreeing to do in addition to the financing package. We're going to connect the bridge to the trails. That physical connection is going to be something we're going to do, along with some ADA ramps. We also are agreeing to obtain some land and provide a little parking on the west side of the bridge. Those are really our commitments to the developer other than the public incentives. And this development agreement, like others, has commitments back to us from the developer where they're agreeing to do some things and provide some community benefit and give the UG opportunities to have bridge events. And those are built into both the lease and the management agreement. Next slide, please. Financing, folks did a good job of touching this and said that the UG's commitment is to put this $2 million in, $75,000 initially. Then when the conditions are satisfied, there's access to the rest. The developer will submit certificates of expenditure to show what they're spending the money on, and we will pay for it on that basis. But it's a $2 million commitment, and the UG is hoping to get that money back through the TIF that Patrick talked about and the CID. And HRNA has projected that we're likely to get that back somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 years. You may ask yourself, though, what if that doesn't happen? What if the projections don't turn out to be correct? Well, in addition to that, we've tried to mitigate the UG's risk by having the developer commit to us that if there are shortfalls, we're going to have an amortization schedule where we're expecting about $10,000 a month when it combined from the incentives. And if it falls short and we're not getting our money back amortized on the schedule at 2% interest like we expect, the developer has committed to guarantee those shortfalls and make payments to us. And so we can make a 60-day demand, and the developer needs to pay us for the shortfalls. So that's another way we have tried to project the UG's interest in that $2 million investment we're making. There are provisions here about events of default, not unlike other things that we have in our development agreements. And you've got remedies here that go all the way to, hey, we could shut this thing down and take back control of the bridge if we really wanted to. Next slide, please, Patrick. For those at EDNF, there have been a handful of changes to this document that you haven't seen. So I'm going to quickly hit those and summarize those and then stop and volunteer to answer any questions people may have. But there are 4 or 5 things here. One, we have moved the date where we start collection of the CID sales tax. We moved that forward to July 1st, 2023, really to line up with the contemplated date of substantial completion for the project, and that makes sense. The developer also asked for some changes about the insurance provisions that will allow them not to go procure and carry the insurance until they get out there and start construction activity on the bridge. Third, there was some discussion at EDNF that the committee will remember about MBE commitments with regard to those operators Mike talked about. In the event that one of those doesn't come through or closes at some point, needs to be replaced, the developer is agreeing to make some commitments about local minority and women-owned business participation. Fourth, there are some changes, significant changes to the management agreement that are primarily about making sure that it complies with FASB accounting rules and that it's really truly a management agreement and not a lease in disguise. So the developer agreed that the UG got to have more control of the operations out there, standards of operations for those public components on the bridge. And then finally, in a general way, I could get more specific. There are, whenever you're dealing with 3 different documents that all sort of govern the same thing, a development agreement, a lease, and a management agreement, there were some things that were not quite consistent as you went from one document to the others, like the cure periods and some other things. And we've gone and trued those up so that the obligations really align in all 3 documents, and it hangs together really pretty well, whether this thing lasts for 33 years or 66 years. So from a pretty high level, that's where it is. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Patrick, did you have anything else?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and since we have 2 items here, just address the second one so that we can discuss both at the same time, and we can, and the public can discuss both at the same time. In addition to the development agreement, we have the ordinance adding property to the existing riverfront redevelopment district. You may recall that the current district was approved last August. We are requesting a small change to add additional areas on both the east and west side of the bridge for parking and trail connections. And really what we're talking about is this area in kind of pink or red right here, and then this area of land right here. So just a small addition on either side of the bridge. And this just gives you a sense, we're almost there, almost to the end of the TIF process. Just a few more dates. We'll do a conformance finding by the Planning Commission, set the resolution for a public hearing on the project area number 4. And then if approved tonight, the final date of approval would be on July 1st. And with that, I'll send it back.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. So is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of this item?
Mayor, the clerk's office received 2 people that are on the attendee side waiting to speak. The 2 requests to speak.
Okay, so please state your name and city of residency for the record. You'll be given up to 3 minutes to state your comments.
All right, Mr. Benjamin Walker would be up first.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Walker. I'm a 4th generation Armadale resident. And I just want to say that I highly support the bridge project and everything that it is about and that it will do for the community. The Kaw River is a natural asset that's at our back door. And it's about time that we stop ignoring it and that we like utilize it. And in my mind, the bridge is also a catalyst for something great for the community and for the river, to preserve the river and to really just spur and activate the community and all of its residents in it. The bridge is also something I see that the community, us in it, can take pride in, and something that we can all come together at and just be a very well-rounded and well tied together community, very cohesive community. Also, the bridge is something that the youth in the area need. We don't really have anything down here that is like inspirational and good for the youth and activities for them to do. And I see the bridge as being a canvas for the youth to paint memories and to draw inspiration from. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about the bridge.
Thank you, sir.
Next up, Mayor, would be Mr. Larry Sprang.
Thank you. Mr. Sprang, give us your city of residency. And you are muted, Mr. Sprang.
There we go. You got me now?
You are. Gotcha.
Larry Sprang. I live in Armourdale, Kansas as well. 1103 Osage. I bought the old fire station, number 6, which is at 11th and Osage. So I'm very familiar with reclaiming properties and turning them into something very cool. We hope that what we did here with the fire station and turning it into a cool residence here in this area was going to spur more activity like that. And we have seen that around this area already. Other residences improving their properties and improving property values and what's happening down here. So what's happening with this bridge, we see tying straight into that with the reclamation of a historic, really cool thing. We also see it as a great, I've mentioned this to many people around the country as I've traveled, and everyone says, yes, this could be a great thing. This would be something great for us to visit. We feel like it gives us a great opportunity to bring people down here and see what else we've got to offer. There's a great deal of restaurants in this whole area. So that's wonderful. Connecting the biking trails is another just wonderful thing that we bike in this area a lot. And there are a lot of bikers in the Armourdale area because of the flat terrain. So being able to connect those areas is going to be a wonderful, wonderful thing. And as Ben mentioned, and as Mr. Zeller mentioned, just making use of that river. I do a lot of travelings in my job and seeing what's happened in Milwaukee and I was just in Louisville and happened to see that development. And so seeing those developments and hoping that we can do the same thing here is a wonderful thing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Deichler, is anyone else present or signed up?
Mayor, no one signed up, but we did have one come in after the deadline. It was a Ms. Heather Strickland, and she was in favor. It was by email.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is there anyone else on who would like to speak in favor, just to be clear? All right, we'll move on. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition to the item?
Mr. Mayor, we do have Daniel Serda, whose hand was up for speaking in support.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Serda, please give us your city of residency.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Daniel Serda, I live in Kansas City, Kansas. I grew up in Armourdale, live in the Rosedale area now, in Shawnee Heights more specifically, and I'm pleased to speak in favor of this project. I would start with sort of the obvious thing that's looking in front of you. Infrastructure is expensive, transportation infrastructure in particular. But I think it's always important to remember that transportation infrastructure is fundamentally a means to an end. If you don't have access across the levees toward the riverfront, you're not going to have access to the riverfront. We can't activate a riverfront without having physical access through safe infrastructure to make it possible. And I think it's important to think about this as a conduit between both the West Bottoms and Armourdale, but more fundamentally a conduit into Armourdale, into the residential area, down Kansas Avenue, as a mechanism that will draw people, that will be a really distinctive destination, as several others have said, and that will really fundamentally transform the potential for redevelopment and development along Kansas Avenue and into the neighborhood itself. I mentioned at the previous meeting, I grew up in Armourdale, and one of the things my dad always told us about the bridges was stay away from them, don't cross them. And that worked for me till I was 12 years old, and he caught me riding my bike across the 12th Street Bridge as he was driving in the opposite direction. So I think the idea that kids could finally have safe access in a place that's intended for them, that there's an opportunity here for businesses, for a really creative reuse that will not only be really distinctive in this region, but more fundamentally, really distinctive nationally as a really inventive, creative reuse of a historic structure is really critical. And I fully endorse this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Serda. Did you notice anybody else?
That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, I will now, again, if there is no one in opposition.
Mayor, we did not receive any requests to speak in opposition in our office.
Thank you. I will close the public hearing. Comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Townsend.
Commissioner Townsend, District 1, thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, good evening. And to the public listening, thank you. I'd really like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Zeller and his group for his and their willingness to address the inclusion of terms related to participation goals for minority and women-owned businesses as part of the Rock Island Carr Bridge Development Agreement. As Councilor LaSala made reference, when the Economic Development Standing Committee reviewed the proposed agreement back in March of this year, there were no, I repeat, no, zero minority and women-owned business participation goals included in the language of the agreement, as the agreement related to opportunity to participate as vendors, as Mr. Zeller has mentioned, such as restaurateurs, coffee shops, or other retail tenants, et cetera. Though minority and women-owned participation goals had been included in the agreement with respect to construction aspects of the project, I thought it was equally, if not more important, to address the possibility for participation by women and minority-owned businesses to become vendors on the bridge in what will, we all hope, will be an ongoing commercial triumph for KCK, long after the construction aspects of this project have been concluded. Lastly, I just want to call to the attention of the group a small but meaningful change that I've already talked to Mr. Zeller and Councillor Waters about, that needs to be changed in the language of the agreement in Article 8, special provisions at Section 8.2b. The very last line of 8.2b uses the term WBE, referring to business enterprises, and that term should be changed to include WMBE, women and minority-owned businesses. The intention here, of course, as Mr. Zeller and others have stated, is to give minority and women-owned businesses an opportunity to fully participate in a real and not illusory way in what we believe will be, many of us believe will be a great project here. So again, I am appreciative of Mr. Zeller and his organization and our economic and legal team and the administrator's office. This looks very different than it did several years ago. So thank you very much.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll follow up something that Commissioner Townsend just said, and that is I do think that the developer and our staff have done a really good job of evolving this project and evolving our agreements over time to the better. I think it's a much stronger project today than it's ever been. I think our risk is mitigated more today than it's ever been. But I want to repeat one thing that I said at Standing Committee so that everybody's clear on this. We are proposing to loan the developer some money, which they will pay back over time. But I want to make sure that people understand that this money that we propose to loan is not general fund money. These are not dollars that we can use for the provision of city and county services. These are dollars that come from a very small tax that is levied on every hotel room rental that are encumbered into a fund to be used exclusively for the improvement or the increase in tourism, for tourism promotion. And given the tourism potential of this project, I think it is absolutely in the spirit of those dollars to use them for this purpose. So I just want to make sure that people understand these are not city or county general fund dollars. They are special dollars to be used for tourism promotion. Thank you.
Commissioner Ramirez, you had your hand up, but I didn't know if maybe you got knocked off again.
I am here, Mr. Mayor. I don't know why my hand is down.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everyone, for the presentation. I'm very excited about this project. Thank you, Mr. Zeller, for sticking with it and working with our Economic Development Director, Catherine Carter, and all of our staff and making sure that this project is the best that it can be. But more specifically, best for the community, because that's who's going to benefit the most. So I thank you for that. I have a couple questions which pertain to the bridge itself. Mr. Zeller, you're talking about, like during the summer, they have all of these activities and programs. Is this going to be a year round? What plans would you have for like the winter months of the year?
Thank you, Commissioner. Our phase 1 business plan is St. Patrick's Day through Thanksgiving. We will open and close the gates at the end of the bridge every morning and evening. During that span, we have also committed to coming and taking responsibility for opening and closing the bridge every morning in between those dates through the winter, and to keep the snow removed on the bridge and to keep a close watch on what goes on out there. We have a lot of assets out there, so we have a enlightened self-interest in taking good care of the bridge and keeping a close eye on what happens out there. It'll be open, in other words, 12 months a year as a public crossing.
Okay. Great. Yeah, thank you for that. I was just
Mhm.
wondering, you were talking about the summer months and all of the activities and things, and that thought came to mind. I was like, well, what was it? What would it look like during the winter? So thank you for that. And another question, and it pertained to what Mr. Lasala was talking about, how through the development agreement, you're going to be maintaining the bridge. And that would include employees, helping maintain and upkeep of the bridge. What is your plan to make sure you try to get as many Wyandotte County residents as those employees, as those workers?
You mean maintenance employees? We're oriented towards Wyandotte County on the Rock Island Bridge, and are going to want to be working with individuals and companies that are based in Wyandotte County. I don't have a specific plan for maintenance, but that's the workforce that's right there at hand and the people we're going to try to do business with.
Okay, and in general, as you said, your business and the bridge itself is Wyandotte County oriented. I thank you for wanting to make sure you have Wyandotte County businesses and workers and residents that are helping with this. I really like that a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely.
One last thing, and I'm trying to go back to the presentation itself that Mr. Lasala mentioned about, it was part of the changes that have been made. It was the insurance provisions. And I know, Misty, our legal, you sent us a communication about that. Could you explain that a little bit? I was trying to read and I tried my best to understand what was happening in that document.
This is Misty Brown, Chief Counsel for the Unified Government. Well, thank you, Commissioner. I'm happy to explain. It sounds like I definitely failed in trying to make it clear. So the documents went through a variety of scenarios that were being asked about potential liability that the Unified Government may have if we entered into this project with Mr. Zeller. So it started with a question of what would be the liability of the Unified Government if someone fell off the bridge and was injured. And we talked about how this would be very similar as to the liability we have if someone fell off the spillway at the Wyandotte County Lake, and that we would have a basically tort immunity under the Kansas Tort Claims Act, but also more importantly, Mr. Zeller will have an insurance policy in place that would cover the Unified Government. We'd be listed as an additional insured. And there's also a indemnification requirement in the development agreement that would cover us. And then the memo went on to talk about various liabilities for the bridge maintenance. So the agreement that we have with Mr. Zellers talks about how while that development agreement is in place, he would be responsible for maintenance of the bridge, operations of it, but any type of structural repairs underneath the bridge, that is something that he would not be responsible for. And the Unified Government is not contractually obligated to fix the structure of the bridge, but as an owner, we would be responsible for any ongoing structural maintenance. Now, Todd, would you like to jump in? You worked a lot on this memo as well.
Sure. I think, Commissioner, to your point, there was a change in the insurance provisions that allowed the developer not to go procure insurance until they start work out on the bridge, which is about 120 days after we close. They commit to us that they're going to commence that work within 120 days after we close. So there is a short period of time where the bridge could be uninsured before the developer commences work.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Misty, for explaining that. You definitely did not fail. I did understand most of it, but there were some parts of it that I had some trouble connecting those dots. So thank you very much for all of the answers. And thank you, Mr. Zeller, again, for being steadfast and staying on this project and wanting to do an amazing project for Wyandotte County, because we need it. And I'm very excited to see what this can do. And hopefully we see what other development we can do along the riverfront. Thank you.
Commissioner Philbrook.
This is Commissioner Philbrook, 8th District, UG. So thank you, Commissioner Ramirez, for your questions. I had a couple of folks ask me about that, so thank you for bringing that forward. And Commissioner McKiernan, thank you so much for making it extremely plain about source of money for that, because like it or not, all of these things we do appear to be very complicated, and especially if you're not involved in creating that and you're not on the Economic Development Committee, you go back through and you go, what? So thank you very much again for that. Thank you for everybody that worked on it. Thank you, Mr. Zeller, for sticking with us and working on this, because I think this is going to be an absolutely phenomenal thing for our community and for your partners in this investment. I hope you make a lot of money, because that means we're going to do well too. Thanks.
Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Burrows, at-large District 2. I just want to thank the committee for their work and their due diligence, bringing forward a number of the questions that led to the contractual and the management agreement that we were witness to this evening. That due diligence has made for a much better project. I also want to thank the Secretary Tolan and the Commerce Department for coming forward and partnering with us on the feasibility study to ensure that whatever actions were taken, that it was in the best financial interest of our community. And two, I also want to thank my committee members who gave their time and talents to review the contract and to come up with the questions and the additions to the agreement that was presented here this evening. I do believe that due diligence by the commission will assist in us being able to communicate the justice in moving this project forward. So committee, thank you. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Zeller. I'm excited that now that there is ownership in the bridge, those tax dollars will be Kansas monies that will be generated for an in-state project.
You're muted, Mayor.
Mayor.
Thank you. So we're at the end. Mr. Zeller, just again, awesome project. You are no longer that guy rowing up the Call River, coming upon an industrial relic, wondering what is this? Where did it come from? Now have a plan, and you have a partner. We will have a partner when we bring this to a vote. Again, what a great project. The bridge is a metaphor in and of itself. It's a bridge to nature. It's a bridge from our past to our future. It's a bridge between the states. It's a bridge between classes of people. All people will be able to enjoy this bridge. As this moves forward, it will really capture the spirit of who Wyandotte County is, and that will spread north and will spread west. So great project coming forward. All right, I entertain a motion. Patrick, what are we voting on first?
I think we can take the development agreement first, Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, this is Commissioner Townsend, District 1. Move to accept the development agreement with the amendment previously stated by me.
Second.
McKiernan, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
That vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion for the ordinance adding property to and amending the existing Riverfront Development District.
Ramirez, move to approve.
Motion by
McKiernan, second.
Ramirez, and a second by,
McKiernan.
thank you, second by McKiernan. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Kiernan.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our regular portion of the meeting. We are adjourned in that capacity. I call us back to order as the Land Bank Board of Trustees. Does any member of the commission or county administrator wish to set aside any item on the Land Bank consent agenda?
Commissioner Mike Kane, move for approval for all items.
McKiernan, second.
I think we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Ramirez, Kane,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes our meeting this evening. Have a good evening.